Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I am Corporal Davis of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, United States Army, Assistant Relief Commander, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The ceremony you are about to witness is the changing of the guard.
Welcome back to another episode of the Society's ongoing efforts to capture the unique histories of the Sentinels who stand the watch at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. I'm Gavin McElvenna, your host, as well as the president of the Society and the Centennial Committee chairman. And I want to apologize because we did take a little time off over the holidays, so I hope that this finds everybody working hard on those New Year's resolutions. If this is your first time, I would like to welcome you. And if you're joining us once again, we're going to continue for a few more episodes talking about Post 1 before we transition to a different topic. Now, these interviews are part of the Centennial Committee's work with the Society historian as we try to capture the memories and preserve these for future generations. You're going to find that these are posted to our YouTube channel and the Society's Facebook page, along with our main website at www.tombguard.org. And of course, we would greatly appreciate it if you take a moment to visit us on our social media and let us know how we're doing, or just make some suggestions for future episodes and what you'd like to hear. Now, soldiers from Post 1 were selected from the 4 platoons within the Honor Guard Company of the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, which is the oldest infantry regiment in the Army. And these soldiers were trained, and if they passed all of the tests, they eventually were selected to serve as a sentinel at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier down in Arlington. And today we're going to get a chance to talk to former Sentinel Jan LIlly of North Carolina, who served down at the tomb in 1960. Jan has been very helpful with providing us photos of his time at Post 1, and these photos really capture the special assignment and some of the unique aspects of the assignment. And we've used those in previous episodes and we'll continue to use those in futures as well. So having said that, let's get to the interview. Welcome back to our 4th episode of interviews about Sentinels who stood at Post 1 on Fort Myer, Virginia. Today we're talking with Jan LIlly, who served as a sentinel at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery in 1960. I'd like to welcome Jan LIlly to the program.
Well, thank you.
Jan, you were among the few individuals that served at Post 1 during a certain time frame. So why don't you introduce yourself and just let us know, where you came from and how you got into the Army in the first place.
I'm a native of West Virginia, Morgantown, and was in school at the university, at West Virginia University, and the recession hit, and I didn't have any money to go to school, nor did my dad, so I volunteered for the draft and was drafted in 19 February of 1959. And went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and took my basic and advanced training there, and received orders to report to Fort Myer, Virginia, and I had no idea where that was, but I got there on the train and went to the headquarters company there at Fort Myers, and there were 16 or 17 of us, and at that time my understanding was that the first choice of the new people coming in was given to the Honor Guard Company, and so we went up and were interviewed by Captain Grace Thomas, and the officers and some NCOs, and out of that 16, 2 of us were chosen to stay with the Honor Guard Company. And from that point, my first assignment was with the 3rd Platoon Firing Party, and this was in July of 59. I was in the firing party for 1 month, and from that, Lieutenant Cosby, the platoon leader of the tomb, and Master Sergeant William Daniel, who was the sergeant of the guard at the tomb, asked me if I would consider going to Post 1, and it was indicated to me that it was a training ground for possible tomb guards, and I accepted. And I got started.
So let me ask you a question about basic training, because I find this very interesting that some of the guys during your era who volunteered for the draft, they went to basic, they went to AIT, and from there they didn't really know exactly where they were going to be sent. When I spoke to John Random, he was actually trained as an artilleryman, but then all of a sudden gets orders to Fort Myer. And so the question I have is, was there a recruiter or anyone that came down and said anything about the old guard when you were in basic or AIT?
No, I had no idea there was such a unit anyway. By the way, I had preliminary orders. I was an infantry MOS. I had preliminary orders to go to Germany, and about the last week before I was to get out of the advanced part of the training, they came to the company there and indicated that my orders had been changed and I was going to Fort Myer, Virginia. That's how I learned about it.
So needs of the Army, you don't need to go drink beer in Germany, you got to go march in Fort Myer, Virginia. So
yeah, that's true.
And we all, those of us that have served in any of the branches of the military, understand the needs of the military, and things change at the drop of a hat. Now,
there you go.
You mentioned something that obviously I didn't have to deal with when I went to basic and AIT. You said that you left AIT at South Carolina there, and you took a train to Fort Myer.
Yeah, it was. I don't know how many of us, because there were some guys that were going to Belvoir, and some were going to Fort Meade and McNair and Fort Myer, and they must have had one whole railroad car, as I remember, because we left Columbia, South Carolina, and it was late evening, and we didn't get into D.C. at Union Station until early the following morning. And then they had a bus there from the Fort Myer to pick us up and take us to the base. And we were quartered in the headquarters company, I guess, down the street. And then we were told the next day there were 16 of us that went to Fort Myer, or 17, whatever. And they would be interviewing us there, and then from there you would be assigned either to some unit at Fort Myer or over at McNair. And two of us out of that bunch were kept by Honor Guard Company.
Interesting. So in Honor Guard Company, once you're assigned there, then did you have to go through a reception period or a train-up period before you were assigned to the firing party platoon?
No, it was done. It was done right within the platoon. I'm sure there was training, because we go out in a quadrangle. The old company structure there. The buildings, you had what we call the quadrangle, and we'd be out there and practice. And of course, the guys in the firing parties have been there for quite some time. They had their assignments to go perform, and in the meantime, we practiced. I mean, we didn't shoot anything there in the quadrangle, but we practiced the formation and our rifles and whatever. And the one thing I remember is when you get your first assignment to go out, whatever you do after that third volley, do not rack that bolt on that M1. That was drilled into us.
Wow.
And I did. I racked it on the first time.
So how long?
That clip went flying.
I'm sure that you received some special training or retraining on that fact to make sure that never happened again.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, how long were you in the company before you actually performed your first funeral in Arlington?
I didn't. In fact, I don't recall that I ever did one in Arlington. We went out. We performed out in surrounding areas for military funerals as well. I don't recall being in a firing party situation in Arlington itself. We were bussed out to wherever the military funerals were taking place, and I don't recall it being in Arlington. Arlington.
That's interesting.
Cemetery.
How far out did you go?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I didn't know the area that well, but probably the perimeter might have been 30, 40, 50 miles out at the most.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that before. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. So you were in firing party. You're living in the barracks. Do you remember where in the barracks you were living at?
Are you familiar where the building where the old the honor guard was at the time I was there?
If it's the same building right next to the gate, then yes, that's the same
That's
building
it.
that I
Yeah,
was in.
okay. That as you come in the gate, it's on the building on the right.
Correct.
Well, the firing party was upstairs. Was looking toward Arlington Boulevard, the firing party quarters, and post one quarters were down the hall on the same floor. And over on the other side of the building, in the other wing, was the drill team and the casket bearers.
Okay.
And down below the post one, on the main floor, were the Tomb Guard quarters.
Okay. Did you have steam presses back then?
Oh yeah, but yeah, you could go down and use the presses, and they had a guy down there that if things got hectic, they would do the pressing for you. But we also had at post one, and of course out at the tomb as well at that time. There was a big laundry down at the far end of that main street, and we had one-day service, dry cleaning and laundry.
Oh, wow. So the barracks life for you, were you in an 8-man bay or bigger, or how was that? How were the rooms broken down for you when you're living in the quarters?
Well, the firing party was a big bay area. I forget how many were in there. And post one was a big bay area. And there were, there were 4 sentinels in each relief in post one. And they all were there. There were 2 relief commanders. It wasn't as large as the firing party, but it was a nice sized bay area. And you had individual cots, not bunks, bunk bed style. It was quite roomy and comfortable.
Yeah, a foot locker and a wall locker as well for all of your equipment.
And yeah, foot locker and 2 wall lockers.
Okay. How much uniforms or how many uniforms were you assigned?
Well, our issued Class A greens. We had khakis, and we were issued. You know what TWs are or were?
Tropical worsted uniforms.
Tropical worsted, the tan woven. We wore them at the tomb as well. We had 2 changes of TWs, and only had our one that was issued to us initially, the greens, the Class A's, and our khakis that we wore generally at night in the summertime out on post one.
And was that something that was just for post one, or was that for honor guard company or the rest of the regiment?
That was just post. To my knowledge, I think it was just post one, but I couldn't swear to it. Well, once I got to post one, and of course the Tomb Guards as well, and eventually got there, we really didn't have much contact with the rest of the company because of the way our duties and schedule was set up. The only time we did anything jointly with the company was if we had to go down to AP Hill for a day of whatever they were doing, or they would bring choppers in and fly us up to Fort Meade for qualification on the rifle range, and then bring us back. We never pulled KP. We never pulled post Fort Myer guard duty. I mean, it was something. It was spit and polish. It was very strict, but I mean, it was great duty because we weren't involved in all the rest of that part of the company.
And I agree with that. When I was down there in the late 90s, we were definitely separated from the rest of the company and regiment. Again, because our duty was so unique and special, they just for the most part, left us alone and let us do our job. And you said that Lieutenant Cosby had approached you to come down to Post 1 and eventually the tomb. Prior to him doing that, did you ever think about going to the tomb, or did you know about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier?
I didn't know about it as to where I had been to the tomb when I was 10 years old on a tour from southern West Virginia, but I didn't know where they were located and all that bit. And when I got to Fort Myer, I began to hear, from guys there in the company and whatever about the tomb and the composition of the company. And that was probably the first time I ever knew about Fort Myer and Arlington Cemetery and the tomb.
So, were you doing anything special to draw the attention of Lieutenant Cosby?
Well, I used to see Lieutenant Cosby. In fact, I didn't know what his title as an officer there was until some time later. But I'd see him there in the company, and he'd walk around and he'd look at the formations, and I assume he was observing the new people that had come in, and so would Sergeant Daniel. He would be walking around, and I guess by simply observation, they figured that give me a shot because there was an opening coming up in Post 1, and they needed to fill it. I don't know whether that person was going out to the tomb or whether they were short timing and getting out. I don't know. But to my knowledge, that's how I think Cosby and Sergeant Daniel came to me and asked me if I'd like to go to Post 1.
And obviously you accepted without hesitation.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because by that time I knew what Post 1 and Tomb Guards were all about. And I thought, man, that is something that I would aspire to, and went to Post 1 and hoped that I'd make the cut at some point.
Okay. Now, when you got down to Post 1, was there any additional training that you had to go through?
They take us out into the quadrangle again, the relief commander or whatever, and they would show us the manual of arms and the sentry box. We'd have to stand outside at parade rest and show us the routine, and on a little chart diagram show us where we had to go and how often we had to make that tour, and then at night what our duty was, and that was to go all the way across from the sentry box in front of Post 1 on the sidewalk, and then walk all the way down. There was a second, I don't know whether he was Navy or whatever, but he was a high-ranking officer in his quarters, and you went behind, and there was a way to get back behind both houses and come out on the lower side of the General Lemnitzer's quarters and come over to the sentry box. At night, we made that tour, but during the day, it was strictly across, down the sidewalk, turn, same movements as out at the tomb on the map.
Okay.
And then come back to the sentry box, and I forget how long we were supposed to be there, and then make another jaunt down.
So I'm reading Special Orders Post number 2, or correct,
Okay.
Special Orders Post number 1. The second special order talks about your route during daylight hours, and it says, I will return to the sentry box using the same route. I will remain in the sentry box for 3 minutes, after which I will walk again my post. And
there you go, 3 minutes.
3 minutes. That seemed very regimented, very strict.
Yeah, it was.
Did you ever have the relief commander or sergeant of the guard coming out there and timing your standing in the box?
Well, if it happened, I was unaware of it, but I had it happen a number of times out at the tomb.
Oh yes, of course.
But I don't recall. I don't recall the timing bit, but I do recall Cosby or Sergeant Daniel or even the officer of the day at the base coming out and asking me about my special orders and general orders, and they check on you too easily there at Post 1, like they could when I was at the tomb, because there were no lights out at the tomb
Right.
at that time.
Were there street lights at nighttime there at Post 1?
But not directly there. Yeah, down the street there was a street light. There was I think there was a light up there, but it was not lit with any brilliant bright type lights at all. No.
Okay. And from what I understand, talking to some of the other guys, you didn't have a flashlight. You just had your weapon, and you would do your duty and do your post in the darkness of night. I'm assuming that you were issued a bayonet.
It was fixed.
It was a fixed bayonet. Okay.
Chrome-plated bayonet.
Okay. So you had the rifle with bayonet, which is a tradition of the old guard and one of the honors that the old guard is allowed to have.
That's right. Yeah.
And with your M1, that makes that weapon what, close to 5 feet in length almost from buttstock to the tip of the bayonet.
I don't know. I'd never thought about what the total length was, but that fixed chrome plated bayonet and that M1 Garand, it probably was at least 4 feet or better, wouldn't it?
Oh, I would assume so. If you're standing at ceremonial at ease, that bayonet's got to be at least your waist, if not a little bit taller. Because I know for the M14, which is what I carried, it wasn't nearly as long as the Grand and the bayonet for the M1 Grand. And it came right to belt level, so I could assume it was a little bit taller than that.
I wouldn't doubt that at all. I never thought about it.
So the officer that you were guarding at Post 1, who was that?
General Lyman Lemnitzer was the chief of staff of the Army. And while I was still there, then change of whatever, he became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he had a different flag. The Army Chief of Staff flag, I think I sent you a picture of it. A mural was painted on the wall there in the Post 1 quarters, was red, basic, and his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff flag was in a blue. So I was there with Lemnitzer when he was not only Chief of Staff of the Army, but also he became chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Okay. Did you ever have the opportunity to interact with the general?
Yes, I did. In fact, I'm going to send you some pictures. He was a very friendly. He wasn't buddy, but he was friendly at night, especially. And I think I wrote that in one of the things I sent you. He would come out and walk his dog. And of course, you're standing over there at the sentry box, and you come to attention, and you salute with rifle salute and whatever. And he'd walk over with his dog, and he'd say at ease, and he would talk to you, just general type stuff like where are you from, or how are things going, and that kind of thing. And if he'd come out to get in his car, chauffeured car, he'd look over if it was in the morning, and he would wave, and of course we would do the military salute, come to attention, and whatever. We interacted with him in that manner, but
right.
He was friendly.
Right. Did you have an opportunity to interact with his family at all?
I would see his wife. She would come out on the front porch, and she would wave, but other than that, no.
Okay. All right. I'm looking at some of the pictures that you sent me, and there's a picture of you in TW uniform outside of the Post 1, and it looks like it's fall time frame, or at least it's sunny daylight. It's not, doesn't look too cold. And I noticed that there's an awful lot of glass there on Post 1 itself, so everybody can see into the post itself. What was inside that structure?
A phone, and in the winter time, there was an electric heater down that was on the floor.
Now, when you were making your rounds, especially, we'll just talk about daytime. You're making your rounds during the day. You've gone out across the street. You've walked back and forth in front of the house, and you come back to Post 1 for your regulated 3 minutes. Were you allowed to be inside Post 1, or did you have to stand outside, as in the photograph you sent me, there at parade rest?
It would depend upon the weather. If it was raining, you could stand inside the sentry box with the door open. If it was snowing and cold, you could stand in the sentry box, and you had that little heater down on the floor.
And other than that, I mean, obviously you would never get caught just hanging out in there for not at parade rest or in a non-military
No,
manner.
no.
Right.
If you were inside the box, of course you had all that glass, those windows to keep an eye on things out there. No, you could sort of relax. I mean, you're not going to lean up against the sentry box and take a snooze or whatever. But no, you didn't have to be in there at rigid posture.
Nice. Okay. And for no reason would you ever step up onto the walkway leading to quarters 1?
No.
Okay.
No, never.
Okay.
Never. I don't know. I don't know if it ever crossed our minds, because that's breaking the routine of going up and down that sidewalk.
Right.
No, I never did.
In wintertime, you was kind enough to send me some pictures of you, and I know you were cold in these photos. Standing outside post 1, the door is closed, but you're standing out on the step there. Snow on the ground. It looks like you're wearing blues, or is that greens?
Those are Class A greens.
Okay. And it's
Yeah.
a little hard for me to tell, but it looks like you're wearing an overcoat.
It wasn't like the dress blue overcoats we had out at the tomb, but they were the basic issued overcoats with a liner in it.
And you got white gloves on now. Were those doubled up in any way, or were they just the straight summer white gloves that the regiment wears?
No, those were straight white gloves.
How cold did it get out there on post 1?
I don't know. I lived 20 years in Wisconsin after I moved up there, and cold up there and cold at Fort Myer are relative terms.
Okay.
It was cold, as you can see by the snow on the ground.
I want you to look at a different photo. This one is
Right.
of you again in the snow. And, well, it may not be you. It's got a sedan in it. It's got the relief commander who's looking like he's just about to step off with an oncoming relief or sentinel. It's taken at an odd angle, and I wanted you to kind of talk me through the angle of this photograph, because it looks like to the left of the sedan is actually Whipple Field.
That's right. That's what that is. That's what I was trying to tell you.
Okay. And so then the houses on the right-hand side, those were not quarters number 1, quarters number 2.
No, but they were general staff quarters.
Okay.
I don't know who all they were.
Okay.
The sentry box is to the left.
So
the guy there that's coming on, that's me.
Okay.
And the relief commander. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes. Excellent. Thank you for sharing those photos. Those are awesome. So how long did you stay down at post 1?
I was there from I started in August, and I was there until I think the middle or end of January of '60.
And then obviously you went down to the tomb, and were you on 3rd Relief at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier?
3rd Relief, yeah.
3rd Relief.
We were the short guys.
And by short, you're talking 6 foot as being the short
That's
guys.
right, yeah.
Most people don't realize that when we have when the tomb is structured for height, that those of us, I was assigned to 1st Relief, so I was the tall relief.
Right.
When we talk short, we're still talking taller than the average American.
You got it.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about post 1 and your time at the tomb there. All right.
Give Rigsby a call if you get a chance.
I certainly will, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thank you again for listening to our interview with Jan LIlly about his time at Post 1 there at Fort Myer, Virginia. I'd like to do a huge shout out and thank the other Sentinels, as well as the Old Guard Museum and Arlington National Cemetery for sharing some photos that we used during this episode. And I certainly hope that you've enjoyed it, and we'll take the time to tune into our next episode as we continue to explore what it was like to stand guard at Post 1 in the late 1950s and early 1960s at Fort Myer. Of course, you can always stay up to date with what is happening within the society by visiting us on our social media platforms, where we've been really focusing on the pending Centennial anniversary in 2021. And that's where you can find out how you and your community can help with things such as the National Salute or just get involved with the Centennial in general. Don't forget to share this episode with your family and friends, and until the very next time, please be safe and line 6.